Hello there, my name's Joe and welcome to my channel. Today I thought we'd take a look at the crop overlay tool in Lightroom Classic. So let's start off with, first of all, how do we get to the crop tool? So assuming that we've opened up Lightroom Classic and we've opened up a catalog, we've got some images in front of us. We're going to select an image. I've selected one down here, and we want to get to the crop tool. Well, so far I found at least 3 ways that we can do that. So the first way is if we click on the develop tab, and then we come down and we can click on the crop overlay icon, and then we're in the crop tool, and we can see that we can now crop the image. A second way that we can do exactly the same thing, if we go back to library, we can press the letter D for Delta, and that will take us to the develop tab. And again, we would need to click on the crop icon to get back in. So there we are again. A third way, and perhaps the easiest way of doing it, if I go back to library, is if we just press the letter R for Romeo, that will take us not only into develop, but straight to the crop overlay tool. So that's the quickest way to go. So there you go. We've got 3 ways of getting to the crop tool in develop. So now that we're in the crop overlay controls, let's just have a quick look at the options that we've got within the control box that we've got here. So there aren't many things to look at, but let's just very quickly go through them. So if I run from right to left on this top row, first of all, we have a padlock, which will either lock or unlock the aspect. So at the moment, padlock is locked, which means that this aspect is locked into this ratio here. So we can't break that while the padlock is closed. If we unlock it, and we can unlock it by either left clicking once or pressing the A key. We can toggle that on or off. Once the padlock is open, we can then change the aspect to whatever we like. And once we've got it to how we want it, if we want, we can lock it again. But let's reset that for now. So that's what that does. Moving over, sorry, let me just reset that. Moving over now to the next box. If we click on the drop down here, we have a list of the image ratios and sizes that we can use that are set here by default. But if we have a particular size image that we want to create and use regularly, we can enter custom sizes as well. And I believe we can add up to 5 custom entries. Now it's worth mentioning that if you do add a custom entry for a particular size, if that size is the same as a ratio that already exists within this list, then it will not create that for you. But when you try to save it, what it will do, it will drop, it will then select the correct ratio for you. I hope that kind of makes sense. So if I show you what I mean, so this image here, it's at its original size at the moment. I want to crop it to an 8x6 inch. Now I happen to know that an 8x6 is a 4:3 ratio. So the 4:3 ratio is already there, but the 8x6 is not. And if I did not know that was a 4:3 ratio, I might want to add that as a custom entry. So let's just do that. So if I left click on enter custom, and now if I just type in 8, I'll tab across to 6 and press OK, we will see, if we go back, we'll see here it's showing that the image is now cropped to 4:3. And if I go to the drop down, we can see it's ticked as 4:3. So this image now is cropped at 4:3. but within the lists here, the 8x6 that I had hoped to add as a custom entry is not there, and that's why. Okay, so let's now take a look at the crop frame tool. So I've reset the image again, so it's gone back to original. I'm just going to bring that back down to 4:3 for my 6x8 image, and I'm now going to click on the crop frame tool, and I'm now going to draw an image, bearing in mind that the aspect is locked here, so I can draw a new crop within this existing crop. And if I let go of the left mouse button now, we should have a 4:3 ratio. But if we look across here, it's showing as custom, which doesn't seem quite right to me. However, I've noticed that if you just very slightly tweak the crop, we're showing the correct 4:3. So I don't know if A, I'm doing something wrong, or B, that's a bit of a glitch in this tool, but the way to get around it is just slightly touch it, and you should go back to the original ratio that you had originally assigned to it. So that's the top line out of the way. We'll take a look at straightening images. Okay, so before we look at the straightening tool or tools, I think we've got at least 4 ways of doing this. Let's first of all, let's reset the image. I'm going to go back to the library and going to select a different image, which hopefully we can use to show us the straightening tool. So we'll go back to develop, click on. Okay, so we've got this image here, and if you look at it very carefully, you'll see that the horizontal line of that radiator cover there is not completely straight. So we can straighten that in Lightroom Classic quite easily. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, we have at least 4 ways of doing that. So the first way that we could do it is we have an auto button there. So I'll click on that. We won't see a big change. So if you keep your eye on the image, and I'll press the auto button now, you see there was a very slight movement, but it has attempted to straighten up the image, which is fine, which is cool. I'll now just reset that, so we're back to where we were. The second tool is we have this slider bar here. Now, if I click on the left click on the slider bar button, first of all, we'll get a grid which assists us to straighten the image, and then I can move the image from left to right to try and attempt to manually straighten the image. This doesn't work great for me because I'm just using a cheapy Windows mouse here, which is not very sensitive, but quite a nice tool. And the moment I let go of the left button on the mouse, the grid will disappear. So that's the second way of doing it. The third way of doing exactly the same thing, let me just do reset, put it back to where you were. Third way is we've got this straightening tool. So if I left click on that, I'll come back over to my image, and if I draw a horizontal line along something that should be horizontal, this line here on this cover to the radiator, so I've left click on that, and now when I release my left click, you'll see that it is straightened again. So that's using the tool. So that's the third way, and I'll just reset now. And the fourth way is by keeping the cursor just outside the image, holding down the left button. I can manually do that way as well, just by line of sight. So 4 ways of doing the same thing. So let's reset that and move on. So the next thing thing to look at in this box, we've got this thing here called constrain to image. Well, constraining the image sounds very much like what this does. And if you click on that, it doesn't really seem to do anything that the padlock is doing. If I untick it, it's the same. So this is clearly related to something else, and we'll look at that towards the end. We'll come back to that because this is actually constraining an image that has been adjusted through other elements within Lightroom, but we'll come back to that later. Okay, so now that we've finished looking at the various options that we've got in the control box for the crop, let's move on to overlays. You may have noticed that there aren't any options here to really select any of the overlays that may be available for your crop tool. So we'll take a look at that. And the only overlay that we've seen thus far is, if you remember, when we came to the straightening tool here and I left clicked and we got the grid. So there's an overlay, but that's the only one that we've seen. So let's look at some more of the options that we've got and how we can control which options that we do see from within our preferences. So the way to access your overlays is you just press the letter O over Oscar and press it once, and you can then start by pressing the letter O. You can cycle through the different overlays that are available to us. So if I slowly start going through the variety, and we're back to the start again. That's quite a list of what we're seeing there. Now we can, in the preferences, if we don't want to scroll through all those overlays every time, we can adjust that. So what we need to do is, if we come up to tools, come down to tool overlay, to crop guide overlay, come to the right and come down, and here, second from bottom, we have choose overlays to cycle. If we select that, we'll see a list of all the overlays that are available, and what we can do is untick the ones that are not really relevant to us. So for me, I don't really need the fifths, the diagonal, the center, the triangle. I use the golden ratio. That's the one that we're seeing at the moment. That's the main one most people would use. I think golden spiral is fairly new to me, but it's quite a popular one, so I would leave that in. And we've got this aspect ratios, which is another handy one that we'll look at as well. So I've got rid of 4 there, and I'll select OK. So now if I press O to flick through my overlays, I've now got a much smaller list, and we're back to beginning again to flick through, and that suits me just fine. Okay, so yeah, so this one here is the golden ratio, but another one interesting, this one here, which is, I call it the curly whirly thing, but I think it's called the golden spiral, I think, by Lightroom. So the golden spiral, and this is kind of an overlay, a bit similar to the rule of thirds, whereby you place an important object in the center of the little curly here to get a nice crop. So so for this image, for an example, if I would quite like to get that swirl over the bride's eye, and that should give us a half decent crop. So this is on the right hand side, so if I pull in my image, just give me a bit of room from the left hand side, and hopefully I maybe do a bit more, overdo it just, and we're looking to get her eye in the center of that squiggle, maybe just a little bit more. So for this portrait, this isn't always a great tool for portraits, but it is quite, depending on what image you've taken, it is worth trying. So I've placed the center of the swirl over the bride's right eye, so left eye, and I'll press return now, and we've now got a crop. And once you have pressed return, the develop tool assumes that you're finished with cropping and moves you back on into the editing mode. So I need to come back to the crop tool, and I'm going to do a reset. Now, if I wanted to move the swirly tool to her left eye, then I would need to move the swirly tool around to the other side. So to do that, all you need to do is hold down Shift with the letter O for the overlay, and you'll see you can start, it'll move to different places, and you just choose the one that's most suited to you, which in this case would be this one, as I now want to do the same as we did before, but this time over the bride's right eye. So the swirly bit's on the left hand side, so I would need to bring in the image from the right hand side. Maybe it's bring, and then like so. I can either press return or press close. It does the same thing. And then we've got that crop too. So so that's how we move overlays that can be moved. Obviously, some overlays like the grid, there would be no point in trying to move those around because they are just squares. But 2 or 3 of the overlays can be moved that way, and it's just, as I say, just hold down Shift and press the O button to see whether or not you can move those overlays or not. If you want to temporarily get rid of the overlay, you can just press the letter H for hotel, and you can toggle that on and off to hide your overlay. If we want to change the overlay from portrait to landscape mode, then we just need to press the letter X. And if we just flick through that, there we go. You notice when we go back to the portrait mode, it doesn't fill it full screen. That's not a problem. If we want to do that, then we can just press Ctrl-Alt and R, and that will bring you back to full screen. So that's Ctrl-Alt and R. Also, if you want to crop on the center, then if you hold down the Alt key and then move in your corners, you'll see that it purely centers the overlay, which can be quite nice too. So bring that back, Control, Alt and R. And another feature that's available to us is tucked away down here where we can see the word never. And what this does, there's a little drop box here, and it gives us the options of what really, how do we want to see the overlays when we first go into the crop tool. Now you can see that mine is set to never. So what that will mean for me is when I click on the crop tool, I don't see any of the overlays, I just see the picture, but I can of course see that I've got the little corners, so I know I'm in crop mood. If I didn't want to select that, I can select always, which will mean that the overlay will always be there unless I hide it by pressing the H key, or I could select auto. And what that will do is when you go to the crop tool, you won't see an overlay, but as soon as you start pulling in any of the edges of the crop, then the overlay will appear. But I prefer to have it to never, so I don't see any overlays unless I want them, and then I would just press the OK to get the overlays. Another thing that you can also do while you're working on your image is if you want to isolate the image from the rest of the Lightroom so you can have a proper look at just the image and not be distracted. You can press the L for lights out mode. So if I press the letter L now, the surrounding software goes to about 80% dark. If I press it again, it goes completely dark and you're just left with the image. So that can be quite useful. So you can just look at the image on its own, press L again, and you're back where you were. If you don't particularly like the background being black, and for one, I personally don't, you can change that. So if you come across on the top line toolbar and select Edit, and then come down to Preferences, once that opens up, if you come across to the tab which is almost center, which is called Interface, you'll see here you've got a lights out block where we've got some options, and we've got a drop down here where you can change the colors to a small selection. I prefer to use the dark gray. You can choose, you have some options there with the percentage, but 80% is fine for me. Now if I click on that, now if I was to go to lights out by pressing the letter L, we've now got a grey background, which is more pleasing to me, to be honest. I'll do it again. So you can change that to your requirements if you want to, and press L again to do that. So yeah, so we've just looked at how to hide overlays temporarily and how to do the lights out. And that's pretty much it, other than what we started off at the beginning, is this screen constrain to image button. And what does that do? Well, that's related to physical changes made to the image. Now I found at least two places where that can happen, and the first one is in lens corrections. So if I make a change to distortion on this slider here, you'll see that the image, and I'm going to go off to the right here, you'll see that we're getting a white box there that we wouldn't particularly want in an image, in the crop of an image. Now, whilst we're in that situation, if I scroll back up to the top, we've now got this box here. Now, if I tick this box now, it will crop so that it stays within the image, so that we won't see any of the white nonsense on the outside. So that is what this button here is for. Now, looking at it, I've also found that, so lens correction was one, but also the transform tool. Let me just find, where's lens correction? Let me just put that, let me just put that back to normal. Let's just come down just to finish off, and we'll come down to transform, and let's do a transform on the image so that again it's out of kilt. Hasn't done anything particularly nice to the image, but you'll get the idea. Come back up to the top, and if we constrain to image, you'll see that it's kept the image within the confines, so it's not affected by the transformations that have been made. And so that's what this button does. It's not really associated with the restraining the image in its normal day-to-day workings. So that's what that is. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much all the options that I'm aware of for the crop tool in Lightroom Classic. I hope you found this useful, and I thank you for your time, and goodbye.